Hey guys, I want to welcome everybody to this episode of the advisory board. I've got two rock stars with me today from a company called Thumbtack. A lot of you in home services know who they are. Fantastic lead generation process driven by homeowners. They've kind of flipped it on its head and done a very good job of that model of lead gen. But I want to introduce these two folks with me, Seth Ellison and David Steckel. Seth is the head of national accounts. Works a lot with multi-units, large brands in the nation. David is the head or the director of strategic partnerships. So he's also a franchise owner and he's done a lot of other stuff. So really great resources today to talk about our topic today of kind of lead generation best practices and what's happening in the industry. We'll get to that, but Dave and Seth, why don't you guys each take a second, tell us a little bit more about you, and also share a little bit more detail about Thumbtack, like what makes you guys unique, and that way people understand contextually why they should be listening to you today.
Yeah, I'll
Sure.
go first.
There you go. Take it, Seth.
Yeah. Hey, so I've been here with Thumbtack now for almost 3 years and work a lot with, well, strictly work with franchise groups and larger national organizations. And so excited to be here today, excited for the topics we'll cover, having the ability to get a small insight into as many businesses as you do when you deal with larger franchise groups is eye-opening, and it also allows us to be able to have a bird's eye view of how the industry's trending, things that are going on. So anyway, looking forward to it.
Yeah,
I've been at Thumbtack for almost a year now. Thumbtack acquired my company, Setter. Setter was a home management company back in 2020, and Thumbtack is now going to be the leader for home management. We're going to be the one stop for a homeowner to go to take care of anything they need to do in and around their home. Think minor repairs like fixing your dishwasher, painting your home, all the way up to major renos. We're here to do it all for the homeowner. And part of that is making sure that we have the best network of suppliers on the platform to be able to handle the jobs, from the small ones that are reactive to maybe planning the gutter cleaning for next year in advance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fantastic. I can't tell you guys how excited I am to have these guys with me because they just know their stuff. So we're going to talk a lot about strategy and just take some notes because you'll learn a lot. Guys, let's start off just kind of generally. Let's talk a little bit about the landscape, because lead generation in home services is an evolving space. You guys mind, Dave, let me turn it to you for a second. Why don't you share a little bit with us about what you've observed from your position running Setter, owning a franchise? You've got a unique perspective on both sides of the house. What's been changing lately, and what is the landscape like in the home service lead gen space?
Yeah, that's a great question. Where I would go with that and say that most homeowners are going to go to the computer first, and they're going to be searching. And so it's table stakes at this point to have an online presence. And one of the best things about Thumbtack is that we power that online presence for you. We do all of the work for you to get you in front of the homeowners. We build your profile to make sure that it's going to be attractive to them. But taking a step back, there's online, and it's about, you probably have some of your previous customers as well that are calling you, and there's some word of mouth. So I would ask and challenge everyone to really consider diversifying their funnel for lead generation. Mm-hmm. And if you have, let's call it 30% from online, 30% from word of mouth, don't forget your previous customers as well. You've already done the work to acquire those customers. You've done a great job. You've gone through AP, AR, collections. You've put out the fires, and you've done everything you could to make that a great transaction. Make sure that you're present and top of mind for them next year. Like, what can you do to have them come back as well? But the main takeaway I'd say is really diversification of your funnel. And especially when you're thinking about online, you only have so many dollars that you can spend for lead generation. So you want to make sure that you're getting a great return on that investment from the company that you're paying to generate the leads for you.
Yeah. That's a great point. I actually want to come back to diversification in a second. Seth, I saw you on mute. From your perspective, working with multi-units and national accounts, how are you seeing their behavior change, or how are you seeing the needs shift in the market with respect to lead generation?
Well, I was going to say, COVID kind of put a magnifying glass on this, and so companies had to learn to pivot quickly to be able to kind of wade through that bit of a storm last year. But I'd say a couple of things. One, demographics are changing in terms of customers. You're seeing a lot more. It's now dominated more by more females making or putting in requests, looking for the work, versus the head of household previously may have been the male. You're also seeing a younger demographic, and you're also seeing a more educated demographic, and that's both on like your formal standard institutionalized education, as well as having the internet at their fingertips and knowing how to manipulate it. So just as you would if you weren't digitally advertising, or if you weren't online, it's ever more important that you have your business buttoned up so that you can set yourself apart from your competitors before a customer ever even contacts you as a business. So we are seeing a lot of changes that way. The other thing that I'd say is competition. I wouldn't say competition's stiffer. I'd just say competition's a lot smarter.
Mm-hmm.
And so being able to operationalize both your online presence and even your business in general becomes ever more important, because you have to be able to, the way that customers operate today, they're not going to wait for you to respond back in a day or a week. They want it now.
Mm-hmm.
And to pile on there, if that's okay, statistically, millennials, and like, I'm 40 and I'm a millennial. So millennials became the lion's share of home buyers a couple of years ago. But now that we've been sort of in the market, we're moving on to our second homes now. And so millennials are the lion's share of both buyers and sellers. And then there's the next generation. And all of us believe in exchanging our money for time and experience. So to Seth's point about operationalizing and being faster, if you don't respond in less than 5 minutes, it's gone, unless you already have an existing relationship. So that like creating automatic workflows to start responding to users very quickly is crucial to your success. And back to the point about getting a good ROI, that's one of the things that we work so hard on at Thumbtack, is making sure, one, you get the right user for you, but two, we have these integrations with amazing companies like Client Tether, and we have the ability to make sure that your response time drastically goes down, which is a leading indicator of conversion.
Yeah. I think this whole demographic shift. Thanks for that, David. We always love the shout out and the love, but the demographic shift has changed also the medium through which we communicate. Right. This millennial crowd, they're a lot more familiar and comfortable doing in-app communication, where that wasn't a thing before. Right. That you guys have the in-platform communication first to try to do the matching of the home buyer with the contractor, rather than just pushing the lead out to 4 or 5 people at a time, right? There's a bit more of a matching process, which I really like about your flow, and but that aligns very well with this new demographic that's buying and selling homes, like you're bringing up, David. But it also means we have to shift our medium. A lot of guys, I still hear people tell me this. Oh, I send an email within a couple of hours, and I laugh at them, because millennials typically, they don't like email. They want to text you, or they want to do in-app messaging, and that's about it. Or maybe a call after you've texted them and built a rapport through that indirect medium. So it's just a funny, like the engagement cycle has to shift. But if you're not that fast anymore, like they have the attention span of a butterfly. They're just bouncing around.
Well, but to be fair, you're looking for, so putting your homeowner mindset on, nothing matters but the fastest path to resolution. So Correct. It's not the attention span of a fly, it's the fastest path to resolution. I have a problem and I want to get to the next step as quickly as possible. The next step is not a complete job. The next step is maybe booking a phone call, or talking about a quote, or waiting for the actual subject matter expert to get to the conversation. So yeah, and then also it's important to consider the journey. So you start building rapport really quickly, but then you need to run a business, and a lot of your business is about setting your future self up for success. So every communication you ever have needs to be documented. So at some point you're going to move to email, because that's one of the more effective ways to have a scope of work delivery, have back and forths, have purchase order sign-offs. But so that's another challenge to folks, is if it's not written down, it doesn't exist. So at some point you need to make sure that your comms are really well organized.
Yeah, because to your point, Dave, I mean, the last statistics I saw, the average email is read in 45 minutes, the average text message 45 seconds. So yeah, I think the answer to this is, look, communicate to them in every possible form that you have. So that's text message, that's a phone call, voicemail, that's an email. On Thumbtack, that's also a message through Thumbtack.
Right.
And then they'll respond back to you, they'll reply back to you in whatever form they prefer to be communicated in.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, to your point, David, it's going to move to email at some point for the bid or quote or what have you. But just make sure that you're meeting them where they're at. And I think the thing that sets us apart from competitors in general is that the customer does control the entire journey. So going back to touch on what you were saying, we don't take information and then spray this out to a bunch of pros. We allow the customer to come in and see who's available to do that type of work in their area. And we've already vetted these pros. They've told us what kind of work they want to do and where they want to do it. So we're only going to show the customer show the pros to the customer that do that type of work in their area. And so if they pick you, that means they've already vetted you. Now they're waiting for you to make or break that experience.
Oh yeah, it comes back. I don't know if you guys are familiar with ZMOT or Google's Zero Moment of Truth, but you mentioned this earlier, Seth. It's all about acknowledging and preparing your business for the fact that the consumers are already making decisions and profiling you, and they're savvy enough to gather all the details they need to make pretty much have most of their decision made before they ever talk to you. And that the business model in every industry shifted that way a decade or 15 years ago, but it's been very acute lately, where if you don't have, I was looking for someone to build a deck for me. And to be real frank, I ran into a few people that had very nice web properties and had zero responsiveness. And I ran into people that had great responsiveness and zero web properties. And like neither one was a good fit for me, because I'm like, I need some validation that you know what the heck you're doing. So we have to recognize things like even reviews online, your online presence in social media. Some of these things are really critical, especially to the current demographic that's buying homes now. And you can't ignore that, because just like in Thumbtack, where you kind of help them find the people that are not only interested in doing that type of work in their market, not just the generic Google search with SEO and PPC terms that push them to whoever pays for them, but actual matching. Then they can also take a look at their profiles and say, yeah, I like these guys. I like their style. Those are the types of projects I want done. And that's the thing I like the most about the way your process works with the matching up front, because most people are trying to do that anyway, and you kind of facilitate it.
Yep.
Yeah. So guys, let's shift gears for a second, because I know as we were talking before, Dave, you mentioned you guys had done kind of a cool survey, and there were a couple of nuggets that came out of that I thought I ought to queue up. So if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about this research that Thumbtack was doing. What are some of the top insights that came out of that that's relevant to franchise and home service companies?
So for the last 10 years straight, we've been surveying small businesses and to learn really how friendly their city and state are, but also to get an understanding of the market from their perspective. It's actually the largest survey that runs in this area. And this past year, we heard from almost 4,000 local service professionals and across all 50 states, across all categories. And a few things that came away that were really exciting. We also surveyed quite a few homeowners, but nationwide, 87% of small business owners told us that there is more than enough opportunity in their community to thrive. This is up significantly from 2019. That being said, and conversely, the labor shortages is one of the highest concerns and most prevalent concerns in a small business. Other really interesting stat that we're very happy to see is that of newly formed small businesses last year, 46% of them were formed by minority owners. And that is a drastic increase from previous years.
Yeah, I love that. And you mentioned one other thing I think is important, because I think it leads into another thought we should discuss. You mentioned, is it 94% of homeowners would like to have the contractor back in their home, or I'm butchering it. Would you share that stat? Because that one, I think, keeps up a really important aspect of our discussion today too.
Yeah, so again, 94% of homeowners that we surveyed said that they are not only comfortable having a service provider back in their home, they're excited to do so. Obviously they'd like them to be vaccinated and a certain percentage wearing a mask as well. But the key takeaway there is that homeowners are excited to get some work done, and there's a lot of urgency around it, which also makes it difficult to respond, schedule, and get the jobs done. So, I'm sure we're going to talk about planning But this is where it's going to become crucial, because if the vast majority of homeowners want something done now, that's a bottleneck. So how can we spread that out to have a consistent experience for our homeowners and for our employees? Like, you know, this is a marathon, not a race. So how can we satisfy all of these homeowners with a great experience and spread it out over time to make sure the work can get done?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And Seth, we're going to make you take the first stab at responding that. But to your point, and before I pitch it to you, Seth, one of the things that this highlights for me is, these folks want us back in their homes. How many of the people that are going to fill out a form and request a service is already a customer in your database? Like, I feel like, and you talked about managing the channels of communication and diversifying the sources that you're using to generate revenue. I just feel like we've got to reiterate, you want to have multiple inputs. One of those inputs has to be your previous customers, and even customers that, this is old news, right? But during the pandemic, things shut down for about 45 to 60 days in almost every state. Didn't matter how green or blue you were, they just shut down. And so there were a lot of deals and projects that just got put on ice. There's still projects like that are being put on ice that need to be resurrected. So it's the most inexpensive and highest converting source is previous customers, either for referrals or for follow-up projects. And if you have a service that's, let's say, like window washing or something that's kind of a recurring or can be a recurring service, power washing, repair, handyman type things. We've had our guy that we work with as a handyman into our house probably 4 times this year. Like, you got to be re-engaging your old customers as your best lead source and asking for referrals. So Dave Hansen's thoughts on that, but Dave and Seth, I bet you guys have some thoughts on, let's say, diversifying our lead flow. Maybe you guys can share some insights on that as well.
Seth, did you want to go first, or?
Yeah, Seth, and I broke the rule. I'm supposed to just ask one of you at a time. So
Steckel, you want me to go for it?
Yeah, go for it, Seth.
Yeah, in terms of diversifying, look, the key is this: your customers are going to be, you need to meet them where they're at, bottom line. So if you're not on Thumbtack, then you're missing out on that demographic of customers, because they're on Thumbtack for other reasons. They've come here for, maybe it's for a photographer for family pictures, or for catering for an event they had. So they come back here for home services. And so if you're not diversifying, and if Thumbtack's not in your mix, then you're not going to get those type of customers. If you're and that goes for any platform or for anywhere digitally. Now, the thing that's probably top of mind for me is when you're in the home services industry and you're a plumber, an electrician, or what have you, in your mind, you're like, look, how do I really differentiate myself from my competition? We both do the same thing. We both fix pipes. We both install pipes. We both run wires, what have you. And the big difference, or where you can set yourself apart, is the experience, the customer experience. So you talk about the speed to lead and getting there quickly. Yeah, that's the first step in the journey, but it can't stop there. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of over communicating. You have to treat every customer as if this is the first time they've ever had an experience with a subcontractor. And in the past, they have had experiences, but they haven't been that great. The communication's been poor at best, and it's been intermittent, and there's just a lot of question marks or unknown. So if you treat every single customer as if this is the first time they've ever had any kind of work done, whether that be plumbing or electrical or what have you, and that you also are constantly communicating with them. So you got an appointment set for a quote, a bid, and to get into their home. You're texting them in between then and saying, hey, you're confirming the appointment the day before, the day of, hey, just want to confirm we'll be there between the hours of 9 and noon. Hey, looks like we're an hour out. Those are the types of things. That's the kind of experience that a customer is looking for. That's also the type of experience that's going to get you referrals without you even asking for them, because you're setting yourself apart from the pack. Nobody else does it. And if they do it, they don't do it well.
Right.
To pile on there again, there's a mentor of mine once said something, and I took it away and I'll never forget it, but luxury is an experience, not a price point. And if you break that down, that really just goes into what Seth's talking about. It's, if you over communicate, do the easy things. So you can talk about, like, we have this experience, like there's a bank. You have a bank of EQ with the customer, and the more that you communicate and the more that you do the little things, you're just depositing. goodwill into your bank, but for every empty coffee cup on a job site, you're withdrawing. Every time you don't respond for 24 hours, you're making a withdrawal. And the problem is as we all know, we're working with human hands and we're working with natural substances, and you're going to lay some hardwood. And you know what? Even if they got the quarter cut white oak and they're going to see these zebra stripes, they're going to think that's deficient. Even though that's what they paid for, they might not know, or there might be knots, or the marble might have a vein they don't like. Things are going to go wrong. This is the industry we're in. Half of our jobs is to fight fires and to get in front of them. By doing a good job with the little stuff, you are protecting your future self for when things go wrong. An employee is going to get a traffic ticket on the way and they're going to be 2 hours late. You're going to show up with 60 watt instead of 100 watt, or 27, 2,700 lumens versus 3,600. Things are going to go wrong, especially with the supply chain now. So get in front of it, give them a great experience where you can. And that a lot of that's about transparency of communication. Yeah. And no coffee cups.
Spoken as a man who runs a construction company, right, on the side. I love it. That's such a true principle. That's a Stephen R. Covey thing, right? The emotional bank account. But it applies to everything, especially in the service industry. Yeah, well, we can say that you quoted the coffee cup concept.
Yeah, I've got slides for it too.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's true. It's true. And Seth, I love the way you're describing it, because frankly, it doesn't matter what channel it is, right? But if you're not giving them a luxurious experience, and I wrote that down, Dave, that was actually poetic. I really like it. That luxury is an experience, not a price point. But if you can give them, even if it's something like trash removal, doesn't matter. Like, think of something that just seems like, it's a real junk job, right? But if you give them a luxurious or a very high-end white glove experience doing something that seems very menial, you're going to surprise them. And that's the hardest thing for your competitors to replicate. Everyone can match price. That's the easiest thing to compete on. Everyone can get the same cool capacity trucks, right? Like, equipment and technology even doesn't create that as much as the experience, which is the hardest thing for your competitors to match.
You mentioned junk, and listen, there's a bunch of companies, but there's one Brian Scudamore and there's one 1-800-GOT-JUNK. And every single one of those employees is wearing a tucked in shirt. They're calling you on the way. Yep. Some of the really good ones will ask you if you want a coffee. They go to the office first to pick up the truck so that they can guarantee that there's a person coming to site. Mm-hmm. They're hauling trash. Yeah. And they are not the most cost-effective option, but they are probably one of the nicest experiences. And all of us can look to what they've done with O2E brands and be like, well, this is a magnificent example of creating a scalable playbook that is providing a great experience for really what is not the most glorious job.
And I would pile onto that and say, we're talking about junk removal. It is not a glorious thing, right? Mm-hmm. And what they've done to set themselves apart is created this outstanding customer experience. And what happens as a result is price becomes irrelevant. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, your only default is to focus on price, which is a race to the bottom. And that's not where anybody wants to go.
No.
You can compete on cost, on speed, and on quality, and you can choose two. But most of the time you choose one, but no one's doing three.
Yeah. And I'm going to have to challenge that last comment, but it takes an exorbitant amount of cost internally to compete on all three, right? Like it almost doesn't make business sense to try to do all three.
That's where the unicorn comes in, right? Yeah. Yeah. And that's where it's like, that is an incredible business. If all of a sudden when a customer's shopping and they're going to have to choose, they have a limited budget, they have a timeline that's important to them, and they have an aesthetic that they're shooting for. Mm-hmm. And to get all of it is really tough. So you have to have a perfect homeowner, you have to have a perfect project, and you have to have the perfect pros. So that's just, I'm calling it a unicorn. They do happen. When you build the dream team, it's the best, but the customer is also part of the dream team and managing their expectations. Yeah. But to your point, it does happen, but.
And I would say oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Seth, please.
Oh, I was going to say the one thing I didn't want to miss in all this is if you really want to set yourself apart, then be curious and ask questions. It's everybody just wants to tell you, here's what we do, here's how we do it, but nobody asks a question. If you don't ask the question, how do you know what the customer cares about? I just recently had this experience with an electrician in my own home. And at the very first time, for the very first time with a subcontractor, the only experience I've had to date, when we walked into my basement to walk through the work that was going to be done. He was quiet and just asked questions. And as a result, it went from coming in to fix a few things to he's wiring the whole thing. He got the whole job. I said, you know what? It's yours. And it was just because he asked questions. And that's really what matters. Like, asking questions tells the customer that they're important and what they need or want matters. And that gets missed a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And I didn't want to skip over the fact that our demographic shift plays into this as well. Right there. You mentioned this early on, Dave, that the millennial buyers, they're more interested in exchanging money for time and experience. Right. And so price is not for the folks that are older than that, your Gen Xers, your baby boomers, everyone in between. It feels like they lean on price a lot, like, give me value in terms of cost. And that's what they care about more. But even them, like I'm kind of in the middle of those groups. I want to have an experience. I want to have a good, like the guy that did my deck, phenomenal experience. Like he's a single man shop. He builds it with his kids. He does like 10, 15 decks a summer. And he was awesome, totally awesome. And I would recommend it to anybody. But that group, especially because they're now becoming the primary demographic, which is going to be moving funds in and out of our target clients, right? Out of home service businesses, realize that they're willing to pay more for the experience. And that's also what, it increases your margin as a business owner. You just invest a bit in your people, help them have that Brian Scudamore, that 1-800 got junk removal. Which one? I forget which one he's got. Not got junk.
No, there's a bunch.
Yeah.
But
that process is key, I think.
I want to go in there because cost of goods are the cost of goods, right? Like a 2x4 is a 2x4. Most people are going to mark, like the GCs or whatever. We have roughly standard markups across the industry and across the state. So COGS are COGS. Like, it's the experience that someone's going to pay for, and they should be allowed to choose what the experience is. You might want a lipstick on a pig job. That's fine. You might want, someone who's been tiling for 65 years and is a master craftsperson to be able to do that. So I do get anxious when people start talking about like cost more. Well, that is the level of finish and the quality that you're paying for. And I really want to hammer that home in the industry at large. This is the COGS. Like, if let's say you were arrested and you were being criminally charged for murder, are you going to look for the most cost-effective lawyer? Or are you going to look for the lawyer that's going to get the job done? So it is having a context of the job done that you require. And it's our job to educate the homeowner as to what the cost of what you want. And to Seth's point, ask those questions. What's the aesthetic? Let me see some inspiration. What's the timeline? Can you go from marble to Caesar stone? There's so many things, but you need to ask the questions, and you need to understand the experience and the outcome that they're looking for. And it's not charging more. It's like that's just the cost of that experience. It's a different experience, not better and not more.
Right. And to your point, it also is not you justifying the cost. They told you what they wanted. So the cost to them is, well, this is what I asked for. So you're no longer having to justify price. That's why it's so critical to just ask questions and educate.
And paint's a perfect example. Like, not enough homeowners understand why, you can have somebody come and quote the house, it's 25 grand. Another person come, it's 12 grand. Another person come, it's 3 grand. What are we talking about? It's like, it goes down into one, obviously, what's the paint that we're using? Obviously the supply there, but that's not the majority of the job at all. The majority is the prep. The majority is every hole filled and sanded? Are we doing a level 5 finish on all the plaster that's being done? Are we applying the appropriate primer? Like, there are so many things to consider with just paint. And like, is the house cleaner after it's painted than before? There's so many things that come in. And And the trades that are offering those 3 price points are excellent at those 3 price points. It's just what is the job that you're hoping to achieve here?
Yeah, that's a great example. Guys, I know we're running short on time here. Let me summarize a couple of key points that I've heard today that I want to make sure we drive home. One is making sure you diversify your lead channels, right? Making sure you've got multiple sources that you can use to drive your success of your business, not to mention inbound net new leads, but your PPC, SEO, all that kind of stuff. Then your previous clients, old leads that never converted, like diversifying and reaching out to and capitalizing each one of those is critical. We also talked a lot about the experience today. Like, how do you stand out and become competitive in a crowd of suppliers where there's a lot of competition in your space, or not as much? How do you make nominal investments in your business and your processes to become a high experience or a luxury service provider? I love that discussion. Didn't anticipate it, and that was fantastic. Guys, what would you add on top of that as far as key takeaways from today that you'd like to make sure? Let's start with Seth, and then let's go to Dave as for a wrap up, that you want to make sure people understand about how do you effectively follow up on leads? How do you make sure this is a good investment for your business?
I'd say number one, operationalize, meaning you operationally everything set in a way that it doesn't require a person. It's wrapped around a process. That's number one. Number two, over communicate. So you can never communicate too much. Nobody's going to be upset with anybody that they're hiring for how much they're communicating with them. And then the third, I would say, is ask a lot of questions and educate.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Great points. Dave, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I would say that operationalize really does handle most of them. But Seth, I think talking more about the top of the funnel in the beginning of the job. But I will say that it's really easy to get distracted by the next job. And there is a shocking percentage of jobs that don't get completed. And if we're talking about diversifying our funnel, making sure we have, a good chunk of your revenue and new customers is coming from Thumbtack. And you're going to get some word of mouth just by the nature of you having your truck around. But if you finish your job and you do a good job at the end, they're going to remember you and refer you. Think about when you go to a restaurant. If you've had an amazing meal, but you're waiting for the bill for an hour, you're upset, and that's ruined the entire experience. So I'm sure most of the listeners here are finishing their jobs and they're doing like a really great exit from the jobs and nice leave behinds. But my challenge would be, as we're thinking about diversifying the top of funnel, the best way to do that is to complete your job and give them a great experience at the end.
Yeah, great feedback. I love the insights, Dave. The last thing I would tack onto this one, guys, no pun intended with the Thumbtack guys being is on whatever lead source you're getting leads from, Thumbtack included. Be first, be fast, and be right. Right? Don't bull crap people, but being able to be first, make sure that you're sometimes cutting other competitors out of the evaluation phase because they've already got somebody who's responded and who is quick. It's a competitive landscape, but 60% of what predicts who wins a job is who talks to the customer first and has a meaningful discussion. So be first, be fast if you want to be first, but then be truthful, be thorough with them, educate them, like Seth is saying. Those are the things that I see from my perspective that make the biggest difference and can double and triple conversion rates and revenue. And that's tough, especially if you can find a way to do that without requiring extra human capital. Even better, get a system in place, use an automation platform, whatever you got to do, because you don't have the staff to do it properly unless you maybe use some technology. So those are a couple of my thoughts as we wrap up, guys. And guys, again, Dave Steckel, Seth Ellison, both from Thumbtack, awesome resources in this topic. So I'd look them up on LinkedIn and connect if you want to dive deeper and unpack some what's in their brains. They've got a lot up in there. Not just good looks, guys, although we appreciate those too. Yeah. Thanks again, guys, for joining us.
Thanks for having us, Dave.